My name is Sarah, and for my entire life, I was the good daughter, which really just meant I was the one who paid for everyone else's mistakes. But when I finally refused to pay my older sister's rent, my parents didn't just get mad, they got violent. This is the story of how an $1,800 debt turned a family holiday into a crime scene. If you love stories about instant karma and seeing toxic people get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Let's get into the story.
My apartment in the city was quiet, the kind of quiet you have to pay extra for. I folded a gray sweater and placed it into my suitcase, smoothing out the wrinkles with the palm of my hand. Everything in my life had a place. My student loans were at zero. My rent was auto-paid on the first. My plants were watered. But as I zipped the suitcase shut, my stomach gave a violent lurch. It was the same feeling I used to get before chemistry finals, or when I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway past midnight. I was going home. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked professional, put together, adult. I told myself that this year would be different. I was 26. I was a senior analyst. I wasn't just Sarah the scapegoat anymore. My phone buzzed against the hardwood table. The sound was like a drill in the silence. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I looked anyway. The name Jessica flashed on the screen. Current mood? Desperate, I thought bitterly. I swiped open the text. Jessica, hey sis. So, funny story, my landlord is being a total psycho. He says if I don't have $1,800 by Tuesday, he's changing the locks. I know you just got that bonus. Help a girl out. Love you. I stared at the number. $1,800. That was my security deposit for the new place I wanted to move into next spring. It was 6 months of groceries. For the last 5 years, my bank account had been a revolving door for Jessica's mistakes. A DUI fine in 2021, stolen rent money in 2022, a dog she adopted and then got bored of. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. No, I typed, then deleted that. I can't right now, I typed, deleted that too. Before I could decide on the right way to let her down gently, the phone rang. The picture changed from Jessica's name to a photo of my mother, Linda. They were in the same room. It was a coordinated strike. Hello? I answered, keeping my voice steady. Sarah? My mother's voice was breathless, pitched high in that way that meant she was already performing stress. Did you get your sister's text? The poor girl is a wreck. She's crying her eyes out in the kitchen. Mom, hello to you too, I said, leaning against the wall for support. Yes, I got it, but I can't send her $1,800. I don't have that kind of disposable cash lying around. Don't lie to me, Sarah. You posted that picture of your new purse on Instagram last week. We know you're doing well. I closed my eyes. The purse was from Target. It cost $30. That's not the point, I said, feeling the old familiar heat rising in my chest. Jessica is 29. She needs to pay her own rent. I can't keep fixing this for her. It's Thanksgiving, Mom snapped, her voice dropping the breathless act. Do you want to ruin the holiday? Do you want us to sit there eating turkey knowing your sister is going to be on the street in a week? How can you be so selfish? Selfish. The word hit its mark. I had spent my entire childhood trying to be the easy one, the one who didn't need braces, the one who didn't need tutoring, the one who didn't need attention. I'm not being selfish, I'm being responsible. The answer is no. There was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, a muffled exchange of angry whispers. Then a deeper voice came on. Sarah. It was Dad, Robert. His voice didn't go up when he was angry, it went down. It sounded like gravel crunching under tires. Hi, Dad. I don't want to hear lectures, he said. He sounded bored, as if my autonomy was just a tedious errand he had to run. Your mother is upset, your sister is upset, you are the only one creating a problem here. I'm not creating a problem, I'm just not solving hers. You listen to me, he said, and the temperature in my apartment seemed to drop 10 degrees. We are family. We take care of each other. You bring your checkbook when you come down tomorrow. We'll settle this like adults, or don't bother coming at all. The line went dead. I stood there in my quiet, expensive apartment, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. Don't bother coming. It was an out, a free pass. I could stay here, order Thai food, watch movies, and keep my money. It was the logical choice, but the little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her dad to look at her with pride instead of annoyance, wouldn't let me do it. I had to go. I had to show them I was good. I had to make them understand. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. I was walking into a trap, and I knew it.
The drive took 2 hours, but it felt like traveling back in time 10 years. As the skyline of the city dissolved into the repetitive sprawl of strip malls and cul-de-sacs, my shoulders crept up toward my ears. By the time I turned onto Oak Creek Drive, my jaw ached from clenching it. My parents' house was a beige 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. It was the perfect suburban camouflage. If you walked by, you'd smell dryer sheets and cut grass. You'd never guess that inside, the air pressure was high enough to crush a submarine. I parked behind my dad's truck, took a deep breath that tasted of stale car air and anxiety, and stepped out. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, bracing myself for the noise, but the house was strangely quiet. The smell hit me first. Heavy sage, roasting onions, and the underlying sweet scent of sweet potatoes. It smelled like every Thanksgiving of my childhood, a sensory trigger that made my stomach growl and knot up at the same time. "Hello?" I called out. "Kitchen!" My mother's voice came back, sharp, clipped. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. In the kitchen, steam was rising from 3 different pots. Mom was at the counter, violently mashing potatoes. She didn't look up. "Traffic was bad," I offered, setting my purse on the island. "Traffic is always bad, Sarah. Most people plan for it." She finally looked at me, her eyes scanning me from toe to head. She frowned at my blazer. "You're dressed like you're going to a board meeting. Go change. You're making your sister feel inadequate." "Where's Jessica?" Mom pointed the potato masher toward the living room like a weapon. "Recovering. She's had a terrible week. Try to be sensitive." I walked into the living room. The TV was blaring the pregame show, but no one was watching it. Jessica was sprawled across the oversized leather sofa, wrapped in a fuzzy blanket. A half-empty glass of red wine sat on the coaster beside her. She looked up as I entered. Her eyes were puffy, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that looked slept in. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a mess. That was her superpower. She was so pathetic, you felt like a monster for demanding accountability from her. "Hey," she mumbled, taking a sip of wine. "Hey, Jess." I sat on the arm of the recliner, keeping my distance. "Mom said you're having a rough week." Jessica let out a dramatic, ragged sigh. "You have no idea. My landlord is literally Satan. He wouldn't even listen to me when I told him my hours got cut. He just wants his money." "That's usually how renting works," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Jessica's eyes narrowed instantly. "Must be nice," she sneered. "Sitting up there in the city with your salary and your benefits. You don't know what it's like to struggle, Sarah. You've always had it easy." I almost laughed. I worked 60-hour weeks. I ate ramen so I could save. Jessica had quit her last 3 jobs because her bosses didn't get her vibe. "I work hard, Jess. I don't just save it," a deep voice rumbled from the hallway. My father walked in. He was wearing his host attire, a crisp button-down shirt tucked into khakis. He looked every bit the respectable patriarch. He walked past me without making eye contact and put his hand on Jessica's shoulder,
giving it a comforting squeeze. "How are you holding up, princess?" he asked her softly. "I'm okay, Daddy," she whispered, leaning into his hand. "Just stressed." He turned to me then. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced with a cold, flat stare. "Did you bring it?" he asked. No hello, no happy Thanksgiving, just the transaction. "Dad, I told you on the phone." "I asked if you brought the checkbook," he interrupted, stepping closer. He was a big man, and he knew how to use his size. He loomed over me, blocking the light from the window. "I'm not writing a check," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He stared at me for a long, uncomfortable silence. Then he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll see about that. You think you're a big shot now? You think you're better than this family? By the end of dinner, you'll remember who you are." The doorbell rang. Dad's face instantly transformed. A wide, welcoming smile stretched across his face. He clapped his hands together. "Showtime! Sarah, get the door and smile. Don't embarrass us." I turned toward the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The trap had been set, and the audience was arriving. I plastered a smile on my face that felt like it was made of cracking porcelain and pulled the front door open. A wall of cold November air and noise hit me instantly. My Aunt Brenda, Uncle Mike, and their 2 teenage sons spilled into the foyer, bringing a gust of laughter with them. Behind them were the Millers, our next-door neighbors of 20 years. "Sarah!" Aunt Brenda shrieked, engulfing me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. "Look at you! We haven't seen you since Christmas. You look thin. Are you eating?" "I'm fine, Brenda," I said, trying to return the hug while stepping back to make room for the stampede. "Work, work, work," Uncle Mike boomed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You city girls and your careers. When are you going to settle down and give your parents some grandkids? That's the real job." Before I could answer, before I could defend my life or my choices, Dad appeared behind me. He didn't touch me, but I felt his presence, like a shadow blocking out the sun. "Sarah's too busy for family these days," Mike said. His voice was jovial, loud, perfect for the audience, but his eyes, when they flickered to mine, were dead. "She barely had time to squeeze us in today. We're lucky she deigned to show up." The group laughed. It was a joke to them. To me, it was the first shovel of dirt on my grave. Come in, come in. Drinks are in the living room." Dad ushered them past me. For the next hour, I was a ghost in my own childhood home. The house filled up with 20 people. The air grew hot and thick, a suffocating mix of roasting turkey, heavy colognes, and the sharp tang of cranberry sauce. I tried to find an ally. I drifted toward Mrs. Miller near the fireplace. She had always been kind to me, sneaking me cookies when I was a kid. "So, Sarah," she smiled, balancing a plate of cheese and crackers. "Your mom said you got a promotion. That's wonderful." "Yes," I felt a spark of hope. "It's actually really exciting. I'm leading a team of 4 analysts now, and we're working on—" "Jessica!" Mom's voice cut through the room like a siren. I froze. Mom was standing in the archway of the kitchen, holding a tray of deviled eggs, but looking directly at the group I was standing in. "Jessica, honey, come sit down," Mom cooed loudly. "You look so pale. Mrs. Miller, did you hear? Poor Jessica has been having such a hard time. Just bad luck after bad luck." The attention of the room pivoted instantly. Jessica, who had been sulking by the window, looked up with wide, watery eyes. She shuffled over, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. "I'm okay, Mom," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't want to bring the mood down." "Oh, nonsense," Mrs. Miller said, turning her back on me to comfort my sister. "You poor thing, what happened?"
I watched as Jessica launched into a vague, edited version of her life where the world was cruel and she was the helpless victim. She left out the part about quitting her job. She left out the part about spending her rent money on a weekend trip to Nashville. I stood there, mid-sentence, my promotion forgotten. I was the wallpaper. I felt a hand on my elbow. I jumped, turning to see Dad. He was holding a beer, his grip on my arm tight enough to bruise. "Stop trying to make this about you," he hissed into my ear, his breath smelling of hops. "Look at your sister. She's hurting. And you're over here bragging about your job?" "I was just answering a question, Dad." "You're provoking us," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm warning you, Sarah. When we sit down at that table, you'd better do the right thing. Don't make me embarrass you." He released my arm and patted my back loudly. "Get a drink, honey. Relax." He walked away, leaving me shaking. "Dinner is served," Mom announced from the dining room. The crowd cheered and began to shuffle toward the long table set with Mom's best china. The silver gleamed under the chandelier. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. I stared at the empty chair that was waiting for me. It wasn't a seat at a dinner table. It was the defendant's chair in a kangaroo court. I took a deep breath, clutching my purse against my side, my shield, and walked toward the dining room.
The dining room table was a battlefield disguised as a celebration. The lace tablecloth was pristine, the candles flickered warmly, and the centerpiece, a cornucopia overflowing with fake gourds, blocked my view of Aunt Brenda across from me. I was seated at the far end, sandwiched between a quiet cousin and the wall. It was the kid's seat, the exile seat. My parents sat at the heads of the table, commanding the space like monarchs. Jessica was seated directly to my father's right, the place of honor. "Pass the potatoes, please," someone called out. "Did you see the game? What a fumble." The noise was deafening, a cacophony of scraping forks and small talk. I stared at my plate. The turkey looked dry. The cranberry sauce looked like congealed blood. My stomach was a tight knot of dread. I took a sip of water, my hand trembling just enough to make the ice cubes clink against the glass. Suddenly, the sharp ting-ting-ting of a knife against crystal cut through the air. The room fell silent. 20 faces turned toward the head of the table. My father stood up. He held his wineglass aloft, his face flushed with a mix of alcohol and adrenaline. He looked handsome in the candlelight, the picture of the benevolent patriarch. "I'd like to say a few words," he announced, his voice booming. "Hear, hear," Uncle Mike cheered. "We have a lot to be thankful for this year," Dad began, his eyes scanning the room, smiling at everyone except me. "We have our health. We have this roof over our heads. We have good friends and neighbors." He paused, letting the warmth settle in the room. Then his gaze shifted. It locked onto me. The smile didn't leave his lips, but his eyes went cold. It was like looking into the barrel of a gun. "But family," he continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious, heavy. "Family is about sacrifice. It's about lifting each other up when the world knocks us down. And it breaks my heart. It truly breaks my heart that not everyone at this table believes that." The air in the room vanished. The guests shifted in their seats, looking down at their plates. They knew. They sensed the shift. "Dad, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He ignored me. He turned to the guests, gesturing vaguely toward Jessica, who had started to dab her eyes with a napkin. "My daughter Jessica is going through a crisis," he announced. "She's facing eviction. She's scared. And we have people in this family, people sitting right here, who have been blessed with abundance. People who just got big promotions, big bonuses. He pointed a finger directly at me. It felt like a physical blow. "Sarah," he said, his voice ringing out, "you told your mother you got a $5,000 bonus last week. Is that true?" It wasn't. It was $3,000, and it was taxed, and it was already in my savings account. But the number hung in the air, glittering and obscene to everyone listening. "Dad, stop," I said, my face burning. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on me. $5,000? And she won't help her sister? "She has the money," Dad said to the room, shaking his head in mock sorrow. "She has it, sitting in a bank account, while her own sister worries about where she's going to sleep next week. She chose greed over blood." "I didn't," I snapped, my voice cracking. "I have bills too, Dad. I have rent. I'm trying to move." "Move?" Jessica wailed suddenly, slamming her fork down. "You're moving to a better apartment while I'm being kicked out?" "You're being kicked out because you spent your rent money on a trip to Nashville, Jessica." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother stood up slowly. She didn't look angry. She looked calm. Terrifyingly calm. "We don't air dirty laundry, Sarah. We help family. Now, your father asked you a question before you arrived. Did you bring the checkbook?" I looked around the table. Uncle Mike was studying his peas. Aunt Brenda was drinking her wine rapidly. No one was going to save me. I was the villain in their play, and the script was already written. "No," I said, gripping the edge of the table. "I'm not paying it." My father set his wine glass down. He didn't slam it. He placed it down with terrifying precision. "Then you don't eat at this table. Get out."
The distance from the dining room table to the front door was maybe 30 feet. It felt like a mile. I walked fast, clutching my purse against my chest like a life vest. My heels sank into the plush hallway runner. I could hear the silence of the room behind me, heavy and suffocating, followed by the scrape of a heavy wooden chair against the floor. Just get to the door, I told myself. Just get to the car. I reached the foyer. My hand was inches from the brass doorknob when a heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. I didn't just stop. I was jerked back with enough force that my neck whipped. I spun around, stumbling, to find my father standing between me and the exit. He was breathing hard, his face a mottled red that clashed with his crisp white collar. "You don't walk away from me, not when I'm talking to you." "I'm leaving, Dad," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "I'm leaving." "You're leaving when you fix this," he said, pointing a thick finger at my purse. "Write the check. Leave it on the table. Then you can go to hell for all I care." "No." The word hung in the air between us. It was the first time in 26 years I had looked him in the eye and truly denied him. His eyes widened. It wasn't anger anymore. It was shock. Then the shock shattered into rage. "You ungrateful little bitch!" He spat. He lunged. It happened so fast, my brain couldn't process the sequence. 1 second, I was standing. The next, the world tilted sideways. He shoved me, a full two-handed shove against my chest. I flew backward. My shoulder blade slammed into the drywall near the coat rack. The hollow thud vibrated through my teeth. A picture frame fell off the wall and shattered on the floor next to my feet. "Robert!" Aunt Brenda screamed from the dining room. I gasped for air, sliding down the wall slightly. "Dad, don't!" I tried to scramble sideways to get around him, but he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my biceps so hard I knew there would be bruises in the shape of his grip. He shook me, his spit flying onto my face. I didn't know whose hand it was.
My head cracked against the wall again. Stars burst in my vision. "Help me!" I screamed toward the dining room. "Somebody help me!" Through the blur of motion, I saw the guests. They were standing in the archway, frozen. 20 people, neighbors I had known my whole life, my own family. They stood there with their mouths open, holding their napkins, watching as my parents assaulted me in the hallway. I said, "Give it to me," Dad yelled, raising his hand again. I curled into a ball, shielding my face, bracing for the next hit.
A heavy grunt broke through the chaos, followed by the sound of bodies colliding. "Robert, that's enough!" The pressure on my arm vanished. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, and hit the floor hard. Through the curtain of my hair, I saw Uncle Mike. He had my father in a bear hug from behind, dragging him away from me. My father was thrashing, his face a mask of purple rage, shouting unintelligible things about respect and money. "Get off her, Robert! Have you lost your damn mind?" Uncle Mike yelled, struggling to hold him back. The hallway was a tableau of horror. Aunt Brenda was holding my mother back, though Mom wasn't fighting as hard. She was just standing there, fixing her hair, looking at me with pure disgust. The neighbors, the Millers, were huddled by the door, looking like they wanted to dissolve into the wallpaper. "Go, Sarah!" Aunt Brenda shouted, her shrill voice. "Just go!" I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled up on all fours, my knees skidding on the hardwood. I grabbed my purse, which had spilled open, stuffing my phone back inside. My blazer was torn at the shoulder. My lip tasted like copper. I lunged for the door, throwing it open. The cold November air hit me like a slap, freezing the tears on my face instantly. I didn't look back. I sprinted across the lawn, my heels sinking into the soft grass, nearly twisting my ankle every step. Keys, where are the keys? I plunged my hand into my purse as I ran, my fingers frantically searching through receipts and lipstick tubes. I could hear the front door bang open behind me. "You walk away now, you don't come back!" My mother's voice screamed into the night. It was high and terrifying, cutting through the suburban silence. I reached my car, a silver sedan parked at the end of the driveway. I found the fob. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped it. No! I dropped to my knees on the asphalt, scraping them raw, scrambling for the black plastic fob in the dark. I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind me, fast footsteps. My fingers brushed the plastic. I grabbed it, pointed it at the car, and mashed the unlock button. The lights flashed. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door. I hit the lock button immediately. Thud. A fist slammed against the driver's side window. I screamed, shrinking away toward the passenger seat. It was my mother. She was pressed against the glass, her face distorted by the reflection of the street lamp. She wasn't crying. She looked feral. She banged on the glass again. "You selfish brat, open this door. Write the check." I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I didn't check my mirrors. I didn't check for traffic. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and stomped on the gas. The tires squealed against the pavement. My mother had to jump back to avoid being hit by the side mirror. As I swung the car around, the headlights swept across the front yard. I saw my father standing on the porch, restrained by Uncle Mike. I saw Jessica standing in the doorway, holding her wine glass, watching the show. I shifted into drive and floored it. The house, the manicured lawn, the Thanksgiving from hell, it all blurred into a streak of beige and darkness as I sped down the street. I didn't slow down until I was 3 miles away, merging onto the highway, putting as much distance as I could between me and the people who were supposed to love me.
I pulled into a Wawa gas station, about 10 miles down the interstate. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the canopy felt like an interrogation room, but they also felt like safety. People were pumping gas. A teenager was buying a slushie inside. The world was normal here. I killed the engine, but my hands stayed gripped on the steering wheel. I couldn't uncurl my fingers. They were locked in a spasm of adrenaline. I forced myself to breathe. In for 4, out for 4. Slowly, the shaking subsided enough for me to move. I flipped down the visor mirror. The face looking back at me was a stranger. My bottom lip was swollen and split, a thin line of dried blood trailing down my chin. My left cheek was already darkening, a mottled red that would turn purple by morning. My blouse, the one I had ironed so carefully this morning, was ripped at the collar, the top button missing. I looked like a victim. I reached for my purse on the passenger seat to find a tissue. My phone, screen cracked from when I dropped it, lit up. It buzzed and buzzed and buzzed. A flood of notifications cascaded down the screen. Mom, 3 missed calls. Dad, 1 missed call. Jessica, text. OMG, Sarah, come back. Dad is really mad. Just talk to him. And then, the one that broke something inside me forever. A notification from Venmo. Linda requests $1,800. Note, rent. Don't be stubborn. We can forget this happened. I stared at the screen. I read it 3 times. My father had shoved me into a wall. My mother had slapped me and clawed at my wrists. I was bleeding in a gas station parking lot on Thanksgiving, and she was still requesting the money? A sound escaped my throat. It started as a sob, but it twisted in my chest and came out as a laugh. A cold, sharp, terrifying laugh. It wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a transaction. I wasn't their daughter. I was an ATM that had malfunctioned. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were annoyed I hadn't dispensed the cash before I ran. The fog of guilt that had clouded my life for 26 years, the feeling that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't do enough, evaporated. I wasn't the problem. I wiped the blood from my chin with the back of my hand. I didn't delete the texts. I didn't decline the Venmo request. I took a screenshot of everything. Then I opened Google Maps. I didn't type in my address. I typed in 2 words. Police station. The nearest precinct was 4 miles away. I put the car in drive. I wasn't shaking anymore. My hands were steady. I wasn't going to go home and hide. I was going to do the one thing they never thought I was capable of. I was going to hold them accountable.
The flash of the police camera was brighter than the lightning had been on the drive over. "Turn your head to the left, please," the officer said gently. Her name was Officer Martinez. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with professional resolve. Click. I sat in the sterile gray room of the precinct, the hum of the vending machine the only background noise. I had given my statement. I had shown them the texts. I had let them photograph the darkening bruise on my cheek and the split in my lip. I didn't press charges that night. I was too exhausted for a court battle, but I filed a restraining order. It was a line in the sand drawn with legal ink. It was the official record that said, "This happened. You are not allowed to pretend it didn't." Driving back to the city that night, I felt a strange sensation. My face throbbed and my heart was heavy, but the crushing weight of anxiety, the one I had carried since I was 16, was gone. That was 6 months ago. The late May sun streamed through the bay windows of my new apartment. It was on the 3rd floor of a brownstone, a place with creaky floors and high ceilings. I had used the Jessica Fund, the savings I used to hoard for her inevitable emergencies, to pay the deposit. I was chopping bell peppers for a salad. The kitchen was silent, save for the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the knife against the cutting board. No phone was ringing. No one was demanding my attention. I walked over to the mail pile on the counter. Most of it was junk, flyers for pizza, credit card offers. But at the bottom, there was a creamy white envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. The loops were tight and jagged. Mom. They had found my address, or maybe the post office had forwarded it despite my efforts. For a second, the old panic flared. My heart skipped a beat. My fingers twitched. The conditioning of a lifetime doesn't vanish overnight. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. I slid my thumb under the flap and ripped it open. I didn't sit down. I didn't pour a drink. I stood right there in the sunlight and read it. Sarah, we haven't heard from you. We hope you're happy with yourself. The police came to the house. It was humiliating for your father. Jessica is back home with us. She was evicted thanks to you. It's very crowded here and money is tight. Your father's blood pressure is up. We are willing to forgive you for the scene you caused at Thanksgiving if you come home and apologize. We're a family. You only get one family. Call us, Mom. I read it twice. 6 months ago, this letter would have crushed me. I would have felt the guilt gnawing at my stomach. I would have wondered if I was the bad guy. I would have called them, crying, begging for forgiveness for a crime I didn't commit. But today, I looked at the words, "We are willing to forgive you." I laughed. It was a light, genuine laugh. They hadn't changed. They were still rewriting reality to suit their narrative. Jessica was back on their couch, draining their resources, and they were miserable. They didn't miss me. They missed my checkbook. They missed their scapegoat. I walked over to the corner of the room where my small home office was set up. I turned on the paper shredder. It hummed to life, a hungry mechanical sound. I didn't keep the letter as evidence. I didn't need it. I knew the truth. I fed the paper into the machine. Whirr! I watched as the handwriting, the guilt trips, and the manipulation were sliced into unrecognizable confetti. The white strips fell into the bin, mixing with old receipts and junk mail. Trash. It was all just trash. I turned the machine off and went back to the kitchen. I swept the chopped peppers into a bowl and poured myself a glass of iced tea. I sat down at my small table by the window and took a sip. The street outside was quiet. My phone was silent. My bank account was mine. You only get one family, the letter had said. Maybe that was true, but you get to choose who sits at your table. And for the first time in my life, my table was peaceful. I took a bite of my dinner, and it tasted like freedom.